Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Plant Problems. I'm your host, Tony Frischknecht, and today I've got a special guest on the show today. I have Gary Heferle with me, and Gary is in farming, just a little bit different. He actually is speaking from the world of fungi. Gary, how are you doing today? Great to have you on.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you. It's nice meeting you.
You as well. And so for everybody that is around the plant world, every now and then we see discussions around mushrooms and fungus, and this is becoming more and more, it's coming out in our world. It seems to be, at least that I've been noticing over the last 5 years. It's still been kind of quiet, but I'm starting to run across guys like Gary. Gary and I actually met at the Hemp Expo a few weeks ago here in Colorado and Denver, and they're doing some unique stuff. And he was really, I mean, Gary, you were really the only one there that I saw. We're talking, several hundred booths were at this, and it was really kind of the coming out of COVID time for a lot of people. So everybody was super excited. And what drew me to Gary is they're just doing something different. So I wanted to bring Gary on the show today and just have a discussion with him and see, Gary, will you share with the listeners, a little bit about your background and really where you came from?
Yeah. So I'm Gary Heferle with Fresh from the Farm Fungi. So that's my company. It's my wife and I, and we grow gourmet mushrooms to sell at farmers markets here in Denver. But we also are starting to break out into some of the nutraceuticals. So, the power of fungi with health is, unbelievable. But also, one of my passions, and ever since I was little, has been just growing things. So I always do a vegetable garden every year, and I've grown a lot of cannabis myself. I'm a pretty big advocate, and I'm so thankful to live in Colorado where, the cannabis industry is thriving. But one of the main reasons why I went to the Hemp Expo was because I believe that there's this huge gold mine of resources at the tail end of the hemp production. So a lot of these big farms out here, they are producing all these products, and then they end up throwing out all of the hemp waste, whether that's, the green waste from the leaves or the core from the stems. And as a mushroom farmer, I believe that we can help close the loop on that process and grow mushrooms on hemp. So I actually, at the end of that Hemp Expo, I got a bunch of sample, just what they would consider waste product. And I started running some test batches this week, actually, on some hemp grown mushrooms, and they're doing really well. They're keeping up with my current substrates, which right now I use sawdust as my main substrate. So I either get it from some woodworkers in the area, or I work with this company called Mushroom Media that they make little pellets out of sawdust. So one of my goals at the expo was to link up the Mushroom Media company with a hemp producer so that they could make hemp pellets, and then I could grow my mushrooms on it. So that was, very exciting. But I happened to meet so many other people there, and, I just learned a lot of information, and I'm still kind of digesting it like 2 weeks later. It was so fun though. And
it's kind of like drinking from the fire hose, right? Everything is happening, and you got that 2 week where you're kind of in this honeymoon phase where you're like, well, I just don't know where to start. Right. And, I'm glad you brought that up because, talking with in the cannabis industry, there were there's so much waste that does happen. And I've spoke about this a couple different times, the recycling aspect of hemp and cannabis, whether you're, tilling it back into the ground, into the soil to make your soil more nutrient, turning it into pellets. This is the first time I've heard about taking and actually growing mushrooms off of pellets, but I love the idea. I actually had an idea of taking the pellets just for fuel and burning them, right? Because they burn really hot. So that was another thing I looked into. So you've got these, you've got this background in cannabis, you got hemp now. So you got pushed into mushrooms, or you were drawn to mushrooms, it sounded like, or what happened there?
Yeah. So kind of my background in the cannabis industry, I started off right when cannabis was legalized here in like, I don't know, 2012 or something. And then I jumped into a tissue culture position. So I was doing plant tissue culture, and we actually bred like 85 different strains for one of the dispensaries here. And after that project was over, I moved into the regulatory aspect. So we were testing cannabis products for contaminants like yeast and mold and Salmonella and E. coli. And
which was a huge business here with the state. And
the
regulations were all wonky. Basically, we had to do some kind of testing, but there was no standardization, right?
Yeah. So in the early days, it was kind of the Wild West. And then I kind of helped, I was a supervisor at one of the testing facilities. So I watched as the laws and all of the mandates kind of changed over time. And I would say nowadays it's so much better than in the early days. But apart from that, I got to go and visit all of these, facilities, because we were working with the CDPHE. So we would help people remediate their issues when they weren't passing the quality control for their products. So we'd go visit all these sites. And in the meantime, I just really got into growing my own mushrooms. I started off growing like little button mushrooms in my garden. And then slowly it built into like this hobby. And my wife and I were eating tons and tons of mushrooms. And at one point we had way too many. So I posted an ad on Craigslist, and, there was a gentleman that he rode his bike all the way from North Lakewood to my house here in Denver. And he showed up at my door.
Which is probably a 30-minute ride at least.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I was growing lion's mane at the time, and this is before it was kind of even known in the general mainstream. And he like grabbed this mushroom and ate it like an apple, and it just like threw me off. I'm like, no, you have to cook that. But at that moment, I kind of realized like, wow, this has like a lot of potential. And I knew that it was a good product, and I really enjoyed, producing mushrooms. So being from the laboratory side of things, like plant tissue culture and testing, I had collected all this lab equipment over the years. And there's a big difference between growing cannabis and mushrooms, in that mushrooms have to be completely sterile. So there's a big laboratory aspect, which is what drew me in. And then, from there, though, it's very parallel to, the full production of cannabis. Like you would clone your plants, so you would clone your mushrooms, and then you have an incubation period, which is very similar to like a vegetative state. Mm-hmm. And then the flowering side is almost like fruiting for mushrooms. So, it went hand in hand. I still believe that there's this symbiotic relationship with mushrooms and plants that isn't being utilized even in the grow rooms, which, I think it's on the cutting edge. And there's already some products out there that utilize fungi for these grows. There's a product called SAC-O2, which it's a slow growing polypore mushroom, and you put it in a bag and then you set it in your grow room, and it breathes off CO2 and inhales oxygen. So the opposite of the plants.
Yep.
And the idea is that you could just buy some of these blocks. They'll live for, up to 8 months or something, and they naturally generate CO2. So it's kind of like
those have actually been around for quite some time. I remember, if you're not familiar too far in my background, but I worked in a grow store for a couple years too. And we had these guys come in and actually say, hey, we can take your CO2, you can use these bags, you can put it in your room. We had really no way to measure it. So it was challenging, but yeah, so these guys are still around. That's great. They've actually created a business out of this. And now, is this your full-time business? Are you growing mushrooms all the time?
Yeah. So we started in 2018, and I decided to step away from, corporate world. My wife and I, we'd always dreamed of starting our own business. So it started off a little rough. Like, I had to pick up some part-time jobs along the way, but we're going into our third season at the farmers market now. And, things are going really well. We also teach classes in the winter, so that kind of hedges against our farmers market season. So right now it's really busy. We're starting to ramp up our production, but it's so cool to have customers come to us, weekly and just talk about mushrooms. And, Denver is just such an awesome community. Everyone's really health conscious and open to, just natural medicines. And I think of mushrooms as nature's vitamin, that takes all these nutrients from the substrate and it concentrates it into these little fruiting bodies, which people eat, and, they taste great and they're super healthy. So there's a benefit for mushrooms in the community. And also, I think that helping close that loop on the hemp, like what I said, will be huge for our environment here. And, there's a lot of gardening programs, and there's a lot of composting programs here in Denver, and that kind of goes hand in hand. And, I just like to spread the nutrients. That's
Absolutely.
how I think of it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Gary, so I want to step back here a minute because, I try to talk with my entrepreneurs a little bit. You've given us a lot of great information. I thank you for that. But really stepping back to you coming out, you wanted to step away from the corporate world.
Yep.
Was it stresses? What actually pushed you over where you're like, I just can't do this anymore?
Yeah. So, I think, my personality as just a contributing factor to society, I'm always driven. Like, I continuously work like 10-hour, 12-hour days. And to me, that's enjoyable. But while I was at these, it was essentially a startup company that I bounced around twice. I gained a lot of knowledge of like what went into a business, what went into starting a business, the ups and downs of the early days. And I started off at the grow, and I saw all these problems and I got really excited about that. But then it reached a point where, we had 400 employees or something, and things started to kind of, dwindle a little bit as far as the energy went. And, I guess I hit a ceiling as far as my growth at that place. So then I would move on to another, startup company. And the cannabis industry is just it was so new at the time, and it was just very dynamic. And then eventually I realized, I'm putting in all this effort and all this energy for these companies, and I should really be doing that for myself and for my family. So that's kind of what, guided me away from those opportunities. But honestly, I learned so much, and I'm grateful that I had the chance to work in that environment. But I feel like I just hit a ceiling pretty, quickly in my eyes. So that's why I jumped ship and just started my own thing. And
so when you talk to your wife about this,
yep.
Was she excited for you? Was she scared? What did she say when you were like, I'm going to quit the corporate and we're going to grow mushrooms?
Yeah. It's always a scary thing to not know the future, not have that stable, paycheck and whatnot. But we're also pretty savvy with our money. And another side thing that I like to do is we flipped a couple properties before. So we always had kind of a cushion, and we're reaching the point now, where, we're thinking about growing more too. So it's just continuous growth and baby steps and setting your goals. But yeah, I mean, it's always scary at first, and then you kind of, get your wings and move forward. And I think that not having like that ceiling where I'm like, all right, well, I did this and this and this, and there's kind of nowhere to go. When you have your own business, you can always reach out into, 100 different directions. And that's kind of an issue too, is like, you have to pick one thing to stay focused on, or at least make sure that you have a solid area before you start going in so many directions. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the curse of the entrepreneur, right? For
Yep.
one, you've got to take the leap of faith. And that's what you did, right? You're like, you know what? We're going to make this work. If you've got to, I think one of the hardest things is if you don't have a partner that's behind you or that's at your side. I think that can really, handicap you as you grow, right? So if you have that solid, I know guys that have done it by themselves. It's very challenging, but they have done it and they have seen some success, and were able to bring their partner along with them. But that took some time. So at least you didn't have that to overcome. But then the other thing is the shiny objects, right? You're seeing, I've got this opportunity, I've got this opportunity, I got that opportunity. Which one do I jump on and really hog tie? And those are challenges as you go through, because what you feel right now is building your company next year may change. You might have to pivot and find something new, right? And I think these are just the entrepreneurial things that we deal with, and these decisions we have to make, when it comes to money, when it comes to are the bills paid, and when it comes to am I happy? What I think we lost sight of a couple decades ago was people were very money driven and material driven. What I'm seeing now, younger generation wise, and I know I'm not that old, but there's in the 20s and 30s, there are some guys that are understanding that they want to enjoy their lives and not just work, live to work. And it seems like am I right? You're kind of finding some of that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, for example, today we cranked out our work early, and then at lunch I was kind of done, and we had this time in between, and we went out and hiked around Red Rocks, where if I was
Awesome.
in a corporate setting, I did my work and everything was done by 12 noon, then you got to wait until 4. And I was always the person that would just go above and beyond and create these projects and stuff. And it's rewarding. And I would say that one of the biggest adjustments is just like, so for me, like, there's a lot of shiny objects in the mushroom industry, especially. And I just kind of focus on my skills, my niche, and what I can bring to the table. And I did the same thing, with the cannabis industry too. Like, I was a laboratory technician. That's kind of my main background. Mm-hmm. And then I joined the cannabis industry. So I used my skill in laboratory to kind of leverage my position. And then the same thing with the mushrooms. Is like, I'm seeing all these opportunities from all the industries that I've worked in, and I'm kind of molding that into, what I'm strongest at. And that's what I would recommend to anyone who's just starting out is, find your strength and kind of build on that, and then see what works and build on that, instead of just doing what everyone else is doing. Yeah. You should focus on like what your strengths are and what you're passionate about, and then, build on those successes.
Yeah. And you've probably found, I'm sure, let me know, you found some people to kind of work with that kind of fill those gaps.
Yep. Yeah. So absolutely, a team is necessary. Right now I have some relationships with other people that are kind of in my position. So one of my good friends, Zach, and I, we teach the classes on how to grow mushrooms together, and we have 2 separate businesses, but we work hand in hand with each other. And that way, we have this connection where we can rely on each other, but then also, we have like an accountant and all the necessary the necessary pillars inside of a business. And then once you have that team established, it takes a lot of stress off so you can focus on your skills again. And it's just a constant balance between, reaching for help and focusing on what's working.
So because first you started with yourself.
Yep.
So what do you think what do you think your biggest mistake was when you just started on your own once you tried to grow?
Yeah. So, really early on, I was just super excited, overly ambitious. And I would say that I just took on too much and tried to grow so fast. And like my wife, she's been there the whole time to guide me, and she kind of helped dial me back. She's like, listen, like, because the first time we were at the farmer's market, like my production was just ramping up rapidly. And instead of sitting down and thinking like, all right, how can I make this efficient? How can I work smarter? I was just doing the same thing, but like 80 hours a week, and it was getting results, but it was just so much work that I had to step back and kind of analyze everything and make it more efficient. So I would say my biggest mistake at first was just over exhausting myself. So you have to think of it as like a marathon and not a sprint. And I was just so excited that I was gaining traction that it was just like overwhelming with the amount of work that I was doing. But, I did learn a lot during that period. So you can't think of it like, the worst thing ever, because I did learn a lot. So I would say though, one of the hardest parts was just balancing between efficiency and effort. And if I would do it over again, maybe I would have bought some pieces of equipment that help me now. As I grow my business, I'm investing into better pieces of equipment rather than just plunging into like this. It's
really easy to get into this mode where it's just like grow more, just grow more.
Yeah.
because especially when you're when you have bills sitting in the back of your mind, like I've just got to make sure that I get this stuff paid, right? So then instead of efficiencies, like you said, you're just like, well, I just need more pounds. That will solve my problems. And it does to a point. But again, you lead to what your problem is I was working 80 hours a week. I was working much harder than I needed to be. And now it sounds like you've scaled that back where you're probably doing half that, if not, maybe a little bit more. But, as people are out there thinking about, I like this because this isn't really focused on just cannabis or mushrooms or this is any business.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the listeners out there, you guys, this is not, I'm not telling you anything. Gary's not sharing anything that's any new in any other business. This is simply how to stay focused as an entrepreneur. And this is a major problem we have. And those efficiencies that start coming into play really start making your processes better, your life better, when you can start honing that in. So you said you're 3 years in now, Gary, to really when you started, right?
Yep.
And when did it start getting a little easier?
So I would say I bought my first sterilizer in like October, and that dramatically changed my life because, it cut a 14-hour process that I was doing every single week down to 40 minutes. So that was like,
that's a huge time saver.
Yeah. So that was like the biggest moment for me. And, my wife and I, we had made a pledge, like, we're not going to go into debt over this. So it took a while. Like we had to save a lot of money to get this piece of equipment. But now that happened, it freed up so much time and energy, and it was a game changer.
So really, it's taken you 2.5 years really to get to this point, really, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And, we're trying to grow every quarter, and it's gaining traction. And I feel like that was the turning point. But along the way, I met all these really cool people. Like I met one of my dad's good friends. He had been growing mushrooms for about 10 years in Niagara Falls, New York. So right in the beginning, I didn't really have anyone to like lean on. And I reached out to him one day, and he, I'm blessed because he kind of mentored me up until the point where I was on my own. So having like that person there too, there's some times where I almost threw in the towel, and then I'd reach out to him and he would be like, oh, I remember when I went through that. So like, that was also like a really pivotal point early on, was just finding this guy, Anthony, who was also, he was 10 years ahead of me. So it kind of coached me through the struggles. And I feel like those 2 points were like game changing, and it helped me get to the next point.
It's also amazing too, when you are in the thick of it, when you're able to reach out to that person. And if you're not just asking them for advice, just somebody to kind of lean on, right? When you're just stressed out and you don't really know what to do. And that mentor, it sounds like he's a mentor to you, kind of changed that all around. I mean, I've had people in my life that have done the same. Something that, I love reading books to learning new technology and learning new things, but that's something that I haven't been able to really get from a book is that extra little, just that little touch you need to get you over the hill to success. And, I've got some guys in my life that had done the same thing for me. And had I not had them there to have these discussions with, I would have been gone a long time ago. It just wouldn't have happened. So if somebody's thinking about, starting growing, or they're looking at this as a hobby, how do you suggest that they get started?
So as far as growing mushrooms, I always say start with a grow kit, and then you can work your way backwards from there. So there's a few companies I recommend. There's one called North Spore in Maine, and there's one called Nearby Naturals in Florida. And they make little kits that you can put on your countertop. And that way they do all the hard work, and then you just get to watch the actual mushroom grow. So that is, I would say that's the easiest starting point. As far as, growing cannabis or any other vegetable, just start with a seed, and you'll learn from every single time you do it from start to finish. It's going to be better and better. So, there's some sad projects when I was growing cannabis too, where, I would get all the way down to the final flower and trim everything, and then it got mold on it, and I'd have to just, ditch it, and that was heartbreaking. But the next time I knew, all right, I have to really be prepared when I'm harvesting my plants to get everything ready so it just doesn't go to waste. So I would say just start off small, like don't overwhelm yourself, and then learn every single, cycle, whether it's mushrooms or plants or cannabis, just learn every single time, and that way it'll get better.
Yeah. And I talk to a lot of guys about this same thing. And what happens is, they don't really put in the mindset that this is something that's living and it's growing. It's not instantaneous, right? I mean, it's taken you 3 years to get to this point, and you probably feel like you still have a lot more to go, right?
Yeah, I think that the more that I do it, the more I realize like I don't know anything. Yeah.
And that's another entrepreneurial thing. You're like, I think I know what I'm doing, but I'm barely making it happen, it seems like, right?
Yeah, like every time is better though. So that's what I look forward to.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give the people, how can people reach out to you at Fresh from the Farm Fungi? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can email me if you have any questions directly. It's freshfromthefarmfungi@gmail. We also have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and we do a YouTube every Friday. We do a Fungi Friday, and we also have a brand new video series that we're doing gardening with fungi. So I'm trying some outdoor projects this year, and we just got started with that. But you can communicate with me through the comments there.
Well, and I also want to go back to the school stuff. I almost forgot about that. So, so if people are interested in learning how to grow, is that the best place to reach you there too, through your email and stuff? Is that so?
Yep. So we have lots of videos on YouTube, but we do an online class. So our last class for the year is actually this Saturday. It's going to be April 11th, I believe, 2021. And then we've got one more in-person class, but it's sold out. And then we probably won't do another grow class until October. That's kind of when the market season slows down. So you can find us at mushroomcult.net. And also it's just on our website. So we'll start posting updates in the fall when we're starting our grow classes. But yeah, so we do our classes from maybe like October till now, and then the market season. And we'll also be at Cherry Creek Farmers Market every Saturday. So if you want to stop by and say hi and grab some mushrooms, we'll be there.
Perfect. So if you guys are interested in really learning about mushrooms, I mean, if you guys are looking for a part-time job, if I didn't have more going on, the price of mushrooms is crazy. And I wanted to talk to you more about this, but we'll chat some more. But, guys, of course, there's the magic mushrooms, but the cooking mushrooms out there, I mean, you can get up to $100 an ounce for just regular cooking mushrooms. Is that correct, Gary?
Yeah. I mean, we're growing our cordyceps, which that's one of the more finicky ones, but we're selling it for $75 for a half ounce.
Oh my gosh.
Those are very unique mushrooms. But there's also, truffles out there that those can go up to $2,000 a pound. So,
guys, if you're looking at a side business and really understanding, and you like growing, right? Yeah. I would totally be jumping into this because not only is it not illegal, right? It's legal stuff. There's hardly anything out there that brings that kind of value. I don't know any crops that do.
Yeah, they're high value crops, and you know what? They're very healthy too. So that's the coolest part, is like they have their value in the market, and they have their value when you consume them, and they have the value when they're keeping things from going into the landfill. So I just fell in love with mushrooms, and if you have any questions, reach out to me and check out our content. And I look forward to the hemp industry and the fungi industry working hand in hand from here on out. I feel like there's so much opportunity for both.
So if there's some hemp growers out there listening, reach out to Gary, because I think he's 100% right. I think the amount of material that is being thrown away is simply ridiculous. And if people really knew how much money was wasted in cannabis and hemp, they would lose their minds, because it is. And so there's these recycle programs that not only recycle something that nobody was going to use, but it also takes it out of our environment and makes our environment better. So that's a huge win right there. So, well, Gary, I really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you so much. And guys, of course, on this episode, you'll see Gary's information in the episode, so you can click on there on the blog page at plantproblem.com. And of course, if you have any other questions for me about Gary, and you're not able to get to Gary first, you can reach out to me too at Tony@plantproblem.com. So thank you so much for joining me today, Gary, and I hope to have you back on the show sometime.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblem.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.